What is that word after Peter?
Oh, I didn't do my spacing very well. Peter Bar Jonah, parentheses, son of, Bar, Peter means son of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. My penmanship is not the best.
That's because you're left.
Yeah.
But lefties are more intelligent.
It's the truth. I have to worry about smudging everything that I write.
My sister's left-handed and she has the nicest penmanship of any of us 4 kids.
Really?
Does.
She had to work so hard at it?
I don't know, but she writes just like this, and it's just, she's artistic, and so it's like she draws.
I had one of my friends in grade school. We were the only 2 lefties in the class, and it was interesting to see how both of us kind of tried to cope with it. Because Brant would curl tighter.
Yes, I've seen that.
Hand around like that.
Both September and Addie do it just like this. They're both left-handed.
That's right. I end up doing like a hybrid. I hook my hand to the left.
But not too much.
He'll figure it out.
It's not, I mean, it's not really an issue with like ink or pencil, but anything marker. I ended up with a black
Oh,
steel.
sure. Well, my penmanship's atrocious, so I can read yours just fine.
It's funny how you just like even the exercise of physically writing things. I can't. I mean, I used to write 10-page papers.
Good morning.
And I complain how my hand was cramped in the end. I write a 1-page letter, and my hand is cramped.
I type
I take care. Good morning.
Morning.
All right, we'll get started. I remembered to start the stream this week, so that was a victory. Morning, Tracy. Okay. So last week we left off in Acts chapter 10, and we were reading about Cornelius. We'll come back to that today in a second. I just wanted to throw out a few more facts about Peter. So right now we're working through the book of Acts because that's one of our primary sources. But we're also going to get to the point where I'm going to also try to build out kind of an image of what that early church looked like in terms of leadership, but especially going from after Acts and onwards, right? Because Acts, the story of Acts only covers up to, I mean, early in the process, right? We don't get Paul's journeys yet. We don't get Peter going to Antioch. We just have, essentially, it's the story in and around Jerusalem and then some in Rome. Here's some interesting factoids about kind of what that early church looked like, is that Peter, who we talked about last week, is held by the Western tradition to be the first pope. He actually was almost kind of like run out of Jerusalem by James the Just. And James the Just is the brother of Jesus. So early in Jerusalem, you had kind of 3 big leaders. You had Peter, you had James the Just, or James, brother of Jesus, and you had, just as with you, John the Apostle. And John the Apostle is the apostle spoken of in the Gospel of John, who the Gospel of John is attributed to, although the majority of scholars today will argue that John did not actually write the Gospel because John was martyred sometime around 62, 64 Common Era, and the Gospel of John isn't written until late 1st century. So depending on who you talk to, you get different opinions on what that means regarding the Gospel of John. And we did talk a little bit about this when we were talking about the context of the Gospels. Kind of the two main branches of thought with regards to authorship is that perhaps somebody following the tradition of John, right? Because all of these dudes have their own disciples. They have their own kind of cadre that follows them. And so it could be that some people or a person following the tradition of John said, you know what, it would make a lot of sense to write down his version of the story. It could be that John the Apostle dictated it to somebody, and it doesn't get published, and published is a really strong word here. It doesn't get distributed until later. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about what that early church looked like. So in Jerusalem, you have these three leaders, John the Apostle, James the Just, and Peter. And the relevance that this has, what we're reading about, is that Peter eventually gets run out of Jerusalem because he gets eclipsed by James the Just. And James the Just is, I hesitate to use the word hardline, but he's with regards to the Jewish-Gentile question, pretty conservative. In other words, he feels that this is only a Jewish movement. It shall not go beyond that. And so he and Peter get into a conflict. Peter errs on the side of let's welcome the Gentiles, and Peter gets run out of Jerusalem. He ends up in Antioch, which we'll talk about later. Peter is known as the bishop or the pope of Antioch. That's where his primary leadership stint is. And what's interesting is although Peter ends up being crucified in Rome, we don't really have much historical documentation pointing out that he spent any significant time in Rome.